They laughed first, and it was not loud in a joyful way, but sharp, almost careless, as if it carried no weight at all. The sound drifted through the air and settled quietly around him. It was the kind of laughter that expects a reaction, a flinch, a reply, a defense. But none came. He stood there, still, not frozen, not afraid, just still, as if something inside him had chosen silence before he even had the chance to speak. His eyes did not lower, and yet they did not challenge either. They simply remained present. Have you ever felt that moment? When words rise inside you, ready to push forward, to explain, to protect, to prove something, and yet something deeper gently holds them back. The laughter continued for a while, echoing in small waves. To them, it meant nothing. It passed like a breeze, light and forgettable. But within him, it touched something quiet, something old, something that had been there long before this moment. He could have spoken. The words were there, clear, sharp, waiting. He could have turned their laughter into silence, or at least tried. But he did not. Why? Perhaps because he had seen this before. Not the same faces, not the same place, but the same pattern, the same moment where noise tries to pull something out of you. The same invisible test that asks, without asking, who are you when they misunderstand you? He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply breathed, slow, steady, as if the air itself was more important than the noise around him. There is something unusual about a person who does not react. It creates a pause, a small confusion. They expect movement, but find stillness. They expect sound, but meet silence. And in that space, something begins to shift, even if no one notices it yet. But silence is not always easy. Inside, there was a quiet tension. Not anger, not quite pain, but a feeling that sat between the two. A question without words. A soft pressure that asked, should I say something? Should I let this pass? Does silence mean I accept it? And yet, he remained. Not because he had no voice, but because he was beginning to understand it. Sometimes, the first response we want to give is not the truest one. It comes quickly, shaped by emotion, pushed by the need to be seen correctly. But deeper than that, there is another place, a quieter place, where responses are not rushed. He stood in that place now. The laughter slowly faded, as all things do. It could not hold itself forever. It lost its shape, its energy, and disappeared into the same silence it had tried to break. And still, he had not spoken. Was it weakness, or was it something else entirely? There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself. It does not rise loudly or demand attention. It simply exists, calm and unmoving, like still water that reflects everything without becoming disturbed. Perhaps he was beginning to feel that. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to stay where he was. Enough to let the moment pass without chasing it, without holding on to it. He did not follow their laughter as it faded. He did not carry it with him. He simply allowed it to be, and then allowed it to end. And in that quiet ending, something small changed. Not in them. They had already moved on, but in him. A space had opened. A space where he did not need to explain himself. A space where silence did not feel empty, but full. And maybe, without realizing it, that was the first step. Not in proving them wrong, but in no longer needing to. The moment passed, but something within him did not return to what it was before. It lingered quietly like a ripple that refuses to disappear completely. Outwardly, everything seemed the same. The world moved on. Their voices found new directions. Their attention shifted, as it always does. But inside him, there was a gentle unrest. He walked away without haste, without looking back. Not because he was certain, but because he chose not to chase what had already ended. Still, the silence he carried was no longer as simple as before. Have you ever held your words back and then felt them echo inside you instead? They were still there, unspoken, unfinished. They rose again, softly this time, not demanding to be heard, but asking to be understood. Each thought carried a quiet question. Was I right to stay silent? Did they think I had nothing to say? Did my silence make me smaller in their eyes? These questions did not rush him. They did not overwhelm him. They simply stayed, like distant clouds that do not storm but refuse to clear. There is a strange weight in not reacting. It is not visible to others. No one sees the effort it takes to remain still when something inside you wants to move, to hold your voice when it is ready to rise, to stand calmly when something within you leans toward defense. It is a quiet kind of discipline, one that no one praises, because no one notices. And yet it asks something real from you. He felt it now. Not as pain, but as a soft tension that lived just beneath his calm. A feeling that stretched between what he could have done and what he chose not to do. He could still hear their laughter, faint now, almost distant. It no longer had the same sharpness, but it had not disappeared entirely. It lingered, not in the air, but in memory, and memory can be louder than the moment itself. He paused for a moment, alone with his thoughts. The world around him continued, unchanged, but he stepped slightly aside from it, just enough to listen inward. Why did it matter? The question came quietly, not as a challenge, but as an invitation. Why did their laughter stay with him when their presence had already faded? He did not answer immediately. Some answers do not come when called. They arrive slowly when the mind softens enough to receive them. He took a slow breath, letting it settle within him. There was no rush now. No one was watching. No one was watching. No one was waiting for a response. And in that stillness, he began to notice something. It was not their laughter that held the weight. It was his need to respond to it. A subtle shift, almost invisible, but deeply felt. The urge to explain himself, to correct them, to be seen clearly. It had not come from them alone. It had risen from within him, from a place that still cared about being understood. still reached outward for recognition. And there is nothing wrong with that, but there is something to see in it. He stood quietly with that realization, not pushing it away, not holding on to it too tightly, just observing, as one watches the tide come in and out without trying to control it. The tension inside him began to change. It did not disappear, but it softened. It became less about them and more about him, about what he felt, about what he believed, about what truly needed to be said and what did not. Sometimes, silence is not the absence of words, but the presence of awareness. He began to feel that now, not as a sudden clarity, but as a slow unfolding. A gentle understanding that his silence had not been empty. It had carried something he had not yet fully seen. And maybe that was why it stayed with him. Because it was not finished. Because it was asking him to look deeper, not at them, but at himself. He did not rush this process. He did not try to force meaning out of it. He simply allowed it to exist, just as he had allowed their laughter to pass. And in doing so, he remained. Ned steady. Not perfectly at peace. Not completely at peace. Not completely at present with it all. And sometimes that is where true strength begins. Not in the moment of silence itself, but in what that silence reveals when everything else has faded. In the days that followed, nothing was said, at least not directly. Their laughter had already dissolved into other moments, other distractions. To them, it was gone, forgotten, as if it had never carried any meaning at all. But something subtle began to change in the way they looked at him. At first, it was barely noticeable. A glance that lingered a second longer than usual. A pause where there would have once been careless words. Not respect, not yet, but a quiet uncertainty. They had expected something from him. A reaction, perhaps. A defense. Even a small sign that their laughter had reached him. But when nothing came, it left behind a question they could not easily answer. What does it mean when someone does not respond? They continued as they always had, but there was a slight hesitation now, a softness in their voices, not out of kindness, but out of confusion, as if they were no longer certain where they stood. And he noticed, not with pride, not with satisfaction, but with quiet awareness. He could see the difference, even if it was small. The space that had formed between what they expected and what he gave. He did not fill that space. He let it remain inside him. The earlier tension had begun to settle. The questions still existed, but they no longer pulled at him in the same way. They had become lighter, like distant echoes that no longer demanded attention. Have you ever realized that when you stop chasing an answer, it begins to come to you on its own? He did not try to prove anything now. Not to them, not even to himself. The need to be understood had quietly stepped back. In its place, the plaque. Air was something steadier, a kind of quiet acceptance, not of their laughter, but of himself. He began to move through his days with the same calm presence, not avoiding them, not confronting them, simply existing as he was, unchanged on the surface, but different within, and that difference could be felt. It showed in the way he listened, without reacting, in the way he stood without shifting, in the way his silence no longer felt heavy, but natural. There is something powerful about a silence that does not come from struggle. It does not resist. It does not hold back forcefully. It simply remains because it has no need to become anything else. They felt it, even if they could not name it. Their words grew fewer around him, not out of respect, perhaps, but because something about him no longer invited the same carelessness. The space he held around himself had changed, and without effort, it began to shape the way others approached him. And still, he said nothing. Not because he was trying to maintain an image, but because there was nothing left to prove. The moment that once demanded a response had already passed. What remained was quieter, deeper, and far more lasting. He understood now, in a way that did not need explanation, that not every voice deserves an answer. Not every opinion needs to be corrected. Not every misunderstanding must be cleared. Some things lose their power the moment you refuse to carry them. He had set something down, something invisible, and in doing so, he had become lighter. Not distant, not cold, just free from a weight that once felt necessary. And in that quiet freedom, his presence began to speak in ways words never could. They could feel it, even if they never spoke of it. The laughter that once filled the air had no place to return. It had nothing to hold on to, no reaction to feed it, no resistance to push again, state. It simply faded. And in its place there was a stillness that remained, not empty, not fragile, but quietly strong. The kind of strength that does not need to be seen because it no longer depends on being understood. Time moved gently, as it always does, without asking, without waiting. The moments that once felt sharp had softened, like edges worn down by quiet passing days. What had begun as a small choice, a simple act of not reacting, had slowly become something deeper. He no longer thought about that moment the same way. It did not return to him with questions anymore. It did not echo in the same restless tone. It had settled, not because it was forgotten, but because it had found its place within him. Have you ever noticed how some things stop asking for your attention the moment you stop giving them importance? He moved through the world with the same quiet presence, but now it felt different, even to him. There was less effort in it, less holding back, less tension beneath the surface. His silence was no longer something he maintained, it was something he had become comfortable within. And that comfort changed everything. There was no longer a need to measure himself against what others thought. No need to quietly defend his worth inside his own mind. The space that once held doubt had grown, still, and in that stillness, something steady had taken root. A quiet kind of self-respect, not loud, not proud, just certain. They were still around, as people always are. Their voices, their opinions, their passing judgments, none of it had disappeared. But it no longer reached him in the same way. It no longer asked for a response, because there was nothing in him that felt the need to answer. And that is a subtle shift, but a powerful one. when the need to react fades, so does the hold others have over your peace. He did not silence them with words. He did not correct them, or prove them wrong, or stand above them in any visible way. And yet, something had changed so completely that their voices no longer carried the same weight. It was as if they had been speaking to a version of him that no longer existed. And perhaps they had. The one who felt the pull to respond, the one who quietly questioned himself, the one who almost spoke just to be understood, he had faded gently, without struggle. In his place, there was someone quieter, not silent in a forced way, but silent in a natural one, like a calm lake that does not need to prove its depth, like a steady flame that does not flicker with every passing wind. He had learned something without being taught, that not every moment deserves your energy, that not every voice deserves your attention, and most of all, that your peace does not come from being understood by others, but from understanding yourself. This knowing did not make him distant. It did not separate him from the world. If anything, it allowed him to move through it more freely, without carrying unnecessary weight. He could listen without absorbing. He could observe without reacting. He could stand where he was, without needing to be seen differently. And in that quiet way, he had silenced everything that once disturbed him, not by force, not by resistance, but by no longer giving it a place within himself. The laughter that once echoed had no meaning. Now, not because it was wrong, but because it was wrong, but because it no longer mattered. It had been a moment, and he had moved beyond it, without chasing, without fighting, simply by remaining still when it mattered most. There is a quiet power in that, a power that does not show itself, but shapes everything from within. And in the end, nothing needed to be said, because the silence had already spoken, not to them, but to him.